Distraction is deadly. Will y'all say that with me? Distraction is deadly, but focus brings freedom. Let's say that. But focus brings freedom. That's what we've been talking about. This is week number 4 of our series about distractions and how we get distracted from the Lord. Like, we want to do what's right. We want to follow God, but man, we get off track. I was reminded of when I was in high school. I think I was a junior, maybe a senior, and I'd gotten pulled over for drunk driving. I hadn't drank. I've actually never really drank. And so this is kind of a weird situation. It was about 2 a.m, and we got pulled over because we decided to help some guy at a movie theater, and he like broke his leg or something. So we took him to his house, but he lived out in the country. And so we were driving down the middle of the road, and this sheriff just happened to see a number of teenage people driving around at 2 a.m, pulled us over, walked up to our car window, and he was like one of these good old boys. He walks up to our car window, he was like, "You boys been a drinking?" And my friend starts laughing, which is not the appropriate response, right? My friend's like, "Oh man." And I'm like, "Sir, we were not drinking." "Oh, you don't think you've been drinking?" And my friend's laughing even harder. And I'm like, "Shut up." He just doesn't stop. And the cop looks at me, and this is not an exaggeration. He said it just like this. "Oh yeah? Well, I smell bourbon." Just like that. My buddy lost his mind. He's like, "Blah!" The cop goes back, gets a breathalyzer. Thank goodness he got a breathalyzer. It was like -5 or something. And so, he let us go. But that was a crazy situation. Here's what I want you to get from this. Nothing happens in a vacuum. We started down the road with a discussion. What should we do tonight? And then we decided to go to the movies. And then we decided to go walk through the parking lot. And we saw a guy laying down, so we went and talked to him. And he said he needed help, so we decided to help him. He said he lives 20 miles out of the city, so we decided to drive his car for him. And we're out at 2 a.m. Like, all of these little decisions led up to this big decision where a cop's now pulled us over accusing us of drunk drive, right? All the little decisions led to the big thing, and thank God he wasn't some like crazy cop, right? He handled it okay. But are you on track right now? All the little decisions led up to the big things. Are you all agreeing with that? Let's go ahead and write this down. Nearly every consequence in my life is the result of many, even thousands of decisions, whether right or wrong. Nearly everything in your life is the result of the decisions you've made. Thousands of little decisions. You decided to get in a certain vehicle this morning, the vehicle that you decided not to air your tires up on yesterday, and you decided to drive to church on a certain route today, and that route you decided to drive a certain speed limit. And are you on track with me right now? All these little decisions add up. A couple weeks ago, the rapper at our church, Jared, me, and 2 of our daughters, we went to the Chiefs game. It was really cool. It was a preseason game. And we'd gone there, and, I know it takes about 3 hours to get from here to Arrowhead Stadium. And we decided to leave about 4 hours ahead of time, right? So there's one little decision. Now, I got to do this without destroying everything else. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, this is like, this one's stacked. There we go. Huh! There was a little decision that stacked it wrong. All right, so one little decision, decided to leave 4 hours early. Another little decision, I decided to go back and get a coat because we were gonna sit up a little high and thought it was gonna be windy. That cost us an extra 30 minutes. Then we were driving there and we drove a certain speed, under the speed limit. Maybe. And then we decided to stop because we were hungry. Instead of ordering $20 French fries at the stadium, we decided to stop at McDonald's on Prospect Avenue. I can tell who's been in Kansas City. Prospect Avenue is not Broadway Boulevard. It is not, let's just say it's not the nicest part of town, okay? We started stopping at the McDonald's on Broadway, and we noticed there's a lot of people sitting in the lobby, and they weren't happy. They were just sitting around bored. Why do people sit around bored in McDonald's? Because they weren't serving food. They were slow. We didn't realize it. We went ahead and ordered our food. And so that's another decision. Then we decided to wait and wait and wait. We waited 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And you keep thinking to yourself, certainly the food's going to come out any moment now, right? So we ended up waiting 30 minutes for a couple cheeseburgers. Have you ever waited 30 minutes at a McDonald's before? Finally, the cheeseburger comes out. Kariah, Jared's daughter, she ordered a cheeseburger. She got a double quarter pounder, good for her. I ordered a cheeseburger. They burnt the snot out of it. I've never seen a McDonald's burn a burger before, but it was black, like hard and scrapey on the bottom of the burger. Poor Jared. If you don't know Jared, he's a pretty picky eater, okay? Is that fair to say? Okay, Jerry's a picky eater. He ordered double cheeseburger, nothing on it, plain, right? You know what he got? He got ketchup, he got mustard, he got onions, he got pickles, he got no burger in his burger. Like everything except what he wanted, right? Like this is terrible. And now we've waited, we've got no food, we're hungry, we're annoyed, we're leaving. And the traffic is the worst I've ever seen. We waited in line. I think everybody decided to go to the Chiefs game late that night. We didn't arrive until halftime was over. That's how late we were because of the McDonald's on Prospect Avenue. But wait, no, not the Prospect Avenue McDonald's. Every decision we made along the way, right? It was a decision to leave a little later. It was the decision to stay and wait for the McDonald's. It was the decision to take the route that we took. It was every little decision, right? Every consequence in my life is the result of many, even thousands of decisions, whether they're right or wrong. And your life is the same way. You have made thousands, millions of decisions, and you are at this point in your life because of those decisions you've made. Agree with me? Yeah, you agree with that, right? Whew. I did not get a ticket from the cop, thank the Lord. We made it at the Chiefs game eventually, thank the Lord. What decisions in your life led to where you're at? Maybe when you were in high school, you just happened to meet a teacher, and that teacher influenced your job choice. And those little interactions with that teacher over years put you where you are today. Maybe you met someone in high school who you started to date and realized you hate that person. And so you wanted someone the opposite. And you've met someone who is the opposite. And that little date you had in high school turned into the opposite person marrying you later. Maybe when you were in junior high, that one dude asked you to smoke a cigarette. And you thought, not a big deal. And so you decided to smoke the cigarette. But then that led to hanging out with that particular group. And then you started smoking some weed and then doing some other stuff. And then you ended up on going to AA and NA because your life was trashed for a number of years. And now you're at Revolution Church because that decision in 7th grade to smoke one cigarette. Are you on track with me right now? Yes. Every little decision affects your destination. Did I just make it sound like Revolution was a bad thing? You start smoking, you're going to end up at Revolution Church. Better watch yourself. Today is important because we're talking about how every decision changes your relationship with God. And we're talking about what little decisions that will push you further away from Him or closer to Him. And if you ignore this today, you may get all the big things right in your life, the right job, the right house, the right spouse. But at the end of your life, you may wonder where God was your whole life because you missed Him in all the thousands of little things and habits that you should have been developing. So last week we started studying about a guy named King Josiah from the Bible who is described as having an undivided heart, right? Like he wanted God, he wanted all God, he didn't want anything that wasn't God, and he purged his country of evil. Remember, we got the toilet up here, and he was purging, is what the Bible says, right? He tore down the idols, he did all this stuff. I want to tell you about Josiah's Israel and Judah, the nations that he lived in. So Josiah's nation had this thing called a temple, and the temple was supposed to be this awesome representation of God on earth. This is an example of the Jewish temple. It was a splendor to see. I mean, it was magnificent. It was gold. It was silver. It was huge stones, massive buildings. Like it was so, everyone who went and saw it came away just with their breath taken away. But by the time Josiah took over as king in Judah, this temple was a disaster. There were shrine prostitutes. A shrine prostitute is a prostitute who says, come into the temple with me and we will worship a false god by sleeping with each other inside the temple for a fee. There were shrine prostitutes in there to worship a false god. There was Asherah poles inside. That's a way to worship another false god, an idol. Okay, there were the Ark of the Covenant that Moses had that helped them fight battles and lead the nation of Israel. It did miraculous things God did through that Ark of the Covenant. It was gone. It was missing. Nobody knew where it was. The joists were cracking, the beams were falling down, the building was falling apart, literally. Now, here's the question. Do you think the temple got like that over the course of one or two really bad decisions? No. Many thousands of years led to that. So the temple started with a guy named Solomon. Solomon was the wisest king who ever lived in Israel. He was wealthy and he was a great king until, and he built the temple. Okay, so Solomon built the temple. It took decades upon decades. But a little while later, Solomon started marrying multiple women from foreign nations. He wasn't supposed to marry anyone who wasn't from Israel. That was the law. But he started doing it, and they started pulling his heart away from God, right? Those relationships you get with people you shouldn't have. Started pulling his heart away from God. And that led to him worshiping idols who were not the one true God. And then a little while later, he fell into sin. And then his son Rehoboam did even worse things than he did. And it just continues to go after Rehoboam, down and down, and all the way until you get to Josiah's time. And the temple is just completely destroyed. It's utterly wasted. Let's go ahead and write this down. The temple of God was in ruin because of many years of neglect and deterioration. Maybe you felt that about your soul at times. Neglected. Maybe you haven't felt it, but if you were really to take a look, you'd realize you were somewhere on this trajectory in your relationship with God. That's possible. You know, last week we looked at Josiah, and it was amazing. There were like so many false gods and Asherah poles and idols, even inside the temple. And what did Josiah do? We read in the Bible that Josiah tore them down, smashed them, burned them, cut them to pieces. He desecrated on the graves of the people who worshiped them, right? And that's great. But what happens if you stop there? What if all we do is purge the problems? We're like, okay, well, this is a problem. I'm going to get rid of this. And this is a problem, so I'm going to get rid of this. And this is a problem down here, so I'm going to get rid of this. And this one's a problem here, so I'm going to, right? If all you ever do is get rid of the problems, you end up with nothing. Josiah kicked the idols out. He tore down the Asherah poles, but then he did something else. Because if all he did was get rid of the evil, he wouldn't be left with anything good. And until you build something good, you still have nothing. So if you're here last week and you decided to purge, you know about some evil, some distractions in your life that need to get out of there, that's good. But you can't stop there. Our lives are the result of thousands of decisions, good or bad. But you can't just destroy. You've got to build. So let's see what Josiah did. If you grab your Bible and turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 34. 2 Chronicles chapter 34. So if you grab a Bible like this, if you're not familiar with the Bible, that's okay. You're just going to go to page 371. The big number here, you'll see some big numbers inside the Bible. Those are chapter numbers. Okay, those are chapter numbers. And then you'll see some really little tiny numbers. Those are verse numbers. So when we say 2 Chronicles 34, that's the chapter 34. And then 8, we're going to find that little tiny number 8 up here. And the reason it says 2 Chronicles is because it's 2 Chronicles. There's actually a 1 Chronicles. So there's 2 book chronicles. One is first, one is second. And so we're in 2 Chronicles chapter 34. And we're going to start reading up here in verse 8. In the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali and the ruins around them, he, Josiah, tore down the altars and Asherah poles, crushed the idols to powder, and cut to pieces all the incense altars throughout Israel. Then he went back to Jerusalem. That's what he did. Remember, he was doing that when he was like 16 years old, 20 years old. He was destroying all this evil. But then in the 18th year of Josiah's reign, to purify the land and the temple, he sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, and Messiah, the ruler of the city, with Joah, the son of, there's a lot of weird names in here, okay? I admit, biblical names are weird. So let's just go ahead and read this. I'm going to maybe try some different names. In the 18th year of Josiah's reign, to purify the land of the temple, he sent Bob, son of Gary, and Jerry, the ruler of the city, with Bob number 2, son of Larry, the recorder, to repair the temple of the Lord his God. What are they going there to do? To repair the temple. They went to Hilkiah the high priest. I want you to hear all these little details. And they gave him the money that had been brought into the temple of God, which the Levites, who were the gatekeepers, had collected from the Manasseh, Ephraim, these are towns, and the entire remnant of Israel, and all the people of Judah and Benjamin, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Then they entrusted it to the man who appointed to supervise the work on the Lord's temple. These men paid the workers who repaired and restored the temple. They also gave money to the carpenters and builders to purchase dressed stone and timber for joists and beams for the buildings that the kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. The workers labored faithfully. How did they labor? Faithfully. And over them, to direct them, were Jahath and Obadiah, Levites, descended from Merari, and Zechariah and Meshullam, descended from Kohath. The Levites, all who were skilled in playing musical instruments, had charge of the laborers, which I think this is kind of hilarious. They put musicians in charge of the building construction guys. Why? I don't know, because we can't do anything else as musicians. We don't know how to do this construction. So we got to just supervise it. Okay, so they put them in charge of supervising. Some of the Levites were secretaries, scribes, and gatekeepers. Okay. we start out with this, and a big long section of what did it say? It said the temple was in ruin, right? We saw the picture. It was utterly destroyed. In the Hebrew word, which this was written in Hebrew, it means just decimated. The temple was nothing. It was trash. Let's go ahead and write this down. King Josiah, after he began to purge, he also started to repair and restore the temple. He cannot just leave things to be destroyed. I mean, destruction was part of what he had to do, and it's part of what you have to do. You have to purge the things from your life that are evil, that are not good, that distract you from God. But you also have to build. I want you to imagine I own a car shop, and I put up a sign that says, any car, get rid of your problem in an hour or less, guaranteed $100, flat rate. Get some business probably, right? People be pulling up like, yeah, I want to know how this works. Imagine a guy with the BMW drops his car off. He says, my brakes are failing. I'm like, okay, I'll take care of that, yeah. So I pull it in. About 20 minutes later, I bring him back out. I'm like, that'll be $100. He's like, you fixed it? I'm like, no. He said, what'd you do? I said, I took your wheels off. I said I would get rid of your problem in an hour or less. Is that business gonna make it? No, you're gonna get some posts on you about from Facebook, right? Like, people are not gonna be happy because you can't just get rid of the problems. You've also got to fix things. You have to build things. I want you to think of this spiritually and practically. Maybe you have an issue that you've been trying to get rid of. Maybe you got rid of that addiction you had in your life, and that's good, but what are you gonna do in place of it? Maybe you've got a relationship that you realized was bad for you, but where are you gonna put your time now? And it's not just how do you replace things that were bad, it's are you even building a good foundation in your life or not? What tools are you using to bring yourself closer to the Lord? I mean, maybe you've gotten rid of pornography. Maybe some of you last week were having an affair and you decided to end it, and that's amazing. But what are you gonna do to be closer to the Lord now other than just stopping drinking or stopping your drugs? You've got to build. And this has to do with your spiritual life. If you haven't built a relationship with God, then you've got issues. You may get rid of everything in your life that you think is bad, and I'm gonna live a good life. But man, there is no neutral when it comes to God. Let me tell you that. You've got to either be building or you're falling apart. Now, let me tell you that the temple was the center of the spiritual life for the people in the scriptures, the Bible, okay, the Old Testament. And Josiah said it had to be a priority to build the places in his life that were the center of his spiritual life. Let's go ahead and write this down. Josiah decided to develop his spiritual life. And so to do that, he was going to develop the place that helped his spiritual life instead of letting the temple deteriorate. Now, the temple was ruined because they didn't keep it up, right? Thousands and thousands of little decisions along the way over many, many, many years, right? I doubt one day some king woke up and said, you know, we got a really beautiful temple. Why don't we put a bunch of idols inside of it and maybe a couple shrine prostitutes and then knock some walls down and hire some spiders to put up cobwebs? Like that's probably not what happened, right? What happened? One day, while everybody was worshiping God in the temple, some weirdo put up an idol way outside of town, probably, right? Way outside of town. And someone said to the king, hey, you know there's like this idol way outside town? He's like, well, who really cares? Does anyone go there? No, not really. Okay, just forget about it. And they moved on. And then pretty soon someone visited the idol, and then a few more people, and then a few more, and then they built another one a little bit closer to town, and well, you know, it's just one or two, there's not that many, and then over the decades, more and more were built, and then the king was kind of interested because all the people thought it was interesting, and well, I don't want to, offend the people, and so he allowed it to happen, and over hundreds of years, it went from something that nobody did to inside the temple. Things develop slowly over time, thousands of decisions. Josiah says we're going to make thousands of decisions to clean it up. Have you ever noticed that cobwebs start developing as soon as you stop cleaning? Like right away. I went outside the other day, out my front door, and I ran into a cobweb. I'm like, wow, where'd this come from? And my wife said, I literally cleaned that front porch like 5 minutes ago. That spider was like, not in my town. No, he's like, no. If you don't put more gas in your car, have you ever noticed this? It'll run out of gas. It's so not fair, right? Like all these little thousands of things. If actually, you know what the truth is here? Am I developing or deteriorating? It's one or the other. Am I developing or deteriorating? It's one or the other. You know, y'all know what I'm going to ask you to do right now, right? Let's say this. Am I developing or deteriorating? It's one or the other. There is no neutral. And a lie a lot of people believe about their relationship with God is that they're neutral. Oh, I didn't really get closer to God this week, but I didn't do anything bad either. It was a neutral week. That's not true. Cobwebs go up as soon as you stop cleaning. We had a garage sale. This is like years ago, before my kids were even older. And it was the weirdest thing. I had this bike sitting in my garage for a couple years. I took it out to sell it at the garage sale. Of course, there were cobwebs all over it. There was dust all over it. The seat was missing. How does a seat go missing? There were bolts missing. This was a perfectly good bike when I put it into storage. Why does the seat go missing when no one touches it? I don't know, but that's how it happens, isn't it? Right? Things deteriorate if you're not developing them. Are you developing or deteriorating? Because it's one or the other. Don't believe the lie that you're cool with God. Don't believe the lie that things are fine, I'm doing okay. Because you're either getting closer to the Lord, you're either building things, or this foundation's starting to crack and starting to get old, and things are happening that will tear it down. I want you to understand, Josiah was talking about the temple, but for us, it's actually the church. 1 Timothy 3 says this, God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. According to this verse, what is the church? It is God's household. It is the pillar of truth. Not a pillar of truth, but the pillar of truth. In a world full of falsehoods, it is the foundation of truth. This is our center right here, being with each other and learning about God together. This is our center. Let's go and write this down. Josiah worked on the temple. And the center for Christian spiritual life is in the church. We're talking about Sundays. We're talking about giving, serving, growth groups. That's our center. That's how we get closer to Jesus. We build these habits inside the church with each other. That's how we develop. Now, are you deteriorating or are you developing? The temple was ruined because they didn't keep it up. It was a consequence of thousands of decisions over time. Now, Josiah wants to fix it. So he's going to make thousands of decisions to fix it up, to participate in it. You and me meeting together right now, the church, this is our spiritual development. I went on a cruise to the Bahamas when I was in high school. I was in marching bands, so you know I was cool. And I actually was the section leader of the trombones. So that means the trombones were my section. And I was friends with the section leader of the trumpets and the section leader of the saxophones. And we were on the cruise ship and we got our instruments out. We started hanging out and we started jamming in one of our rooms. And we're playing in there. The cruise ship had pulled into the Bahamas and the rest of the band was getting off the ship, ready to go play in this country. And we didn't realize what time it was. We got a little more time, we're good. We just kept playing and jamming in a room until suddenly someone is like, guys, we're supposed to be on the dock right now. And we run outside and we look over the balcony. I don't know how many stories high this was. And we see way, way down there, the whole marching band in formation, except the band director out front going like this. Couldn't hear her, but I know what she's saying. Where are my stinking section leaders? Right? We were supposed to be the leaders and we weren't there because we were messing around. So we tried to get down to the band, but I'm terrible at directions. I get lost all the time. I got lost in the boat too. We could not find our way off the stinking boat. We were freaking out. Why did it happen? Because 1 second led to another second, led to another second, led to now it's too late. Now the rest of the band is ready. Now we're missing it. But listen, you are making good decisions. You are here. That is one good decision. Now you're going to go home. You're going to make another good decision. Are you developing or are you deteriorating? It's one or the other. The problem is a lot of people, they go to church and then, they miss a week. Okay? It's actually not that big of a deal to miss a week. Okay? I mean, I'll miss a week. I'm going to go on vacation sometime, right? I'll miss a week. But then the problem is, you miss another week. See where this is going, right? And then another week. And then pretty soon, I don't really have time for growth group either. And then all of a sudden, I'm kind of short on my money. I haven't been at church. I'm not in growth group. I'm just going to not give to God this week. And you are deteriorating, and it feels completely natural. Hear that? It feels completely natural because it is completely natural to deteriorate. Building takes work, doesn't it? People will tell me, man, going to church sometimes is hard. It's like going to a growth group. Sometimes I don't want to go and I have to go anyway and it's difficult. Yeah, building is way more difficult than destroying. Destroying happens automatically. People will come to me and say, I feel like I'm not really part of the church anymore. And I'll say, well, that's sad. Why do you feel that way? I don't know. I feel like nobody wants me here. I'm like, well, what about the people in your growth group? Oh, well, I stopped going to growth group last year. Oh, okay. Well, when you come on Sunday morning, like, who do you talk to? Well, I haven't come on Sunday. I come every couple months. Okay. Well, are you giving to God? Well, I put in like $5 a couple weeks ago, but like not like big. I think I see the problem, right? If you're not building the place where your spiritual life grows, you're deteriorating from that place. This is why the Bible has in Hebrews this little phrase, let us consider, okay, so this is like a consider, like you're supposed to think about this and process this, right? Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Now, we would all agree with that. We should be spurring one another on. We want to get each other to do great things. How do you do this? Spur one another on towards love and good deeds, and here's how to do it. Not giving up meeting together, okay? The way you spur one another on is you continue to meet together, no matter how we feel. He says, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. So some people are in the habit of not meeting, right? They're giving up meeting together. They've gotten in the habit of skipping. But we want to encourage each other. How do you encourage? How do you spur? Well, first things first, you're here. So, I'm kind of preaching to the choir today because you all are here. But just hear this and say to yourself, okay, this is a good reminder that I really do have to be here and participating to grow spiritually. Well, if you're not here and you're not participating, then you're just kind of out there. Have you ever heard anyone talk about, well, nature's my church? You ever heard anyone say that? Like, do you know what the Greek word for church is? It's a word that means business meeting with other people in a specific place for a specific purpose. That's the Greek word for church. Who are the people you're meeting with, and what is the purpose? And is it for God's purpose, or is it for catching fish? Because catching fish was something Jesus did, but that wasn't his church. Right? There's a difference between catching fish and having accountability. There's a difference between feeling at peace and building your spiritual life with other people. There's a difference there. Again, crashing and burning feels totally natural. Deteriorating is normal, and you may not even notice it unless you take notice. But building takes work. So what was some of the work? Let's go back to 2 Chronicles chapter 34. Look at some of the work they did. Verse 9. They went to Hilkiah, the high priest, and gave him well wishes. No, what does it say? They went to Hilkiah the priest and gave him some encouragement. Oh, thank you. They gave him the money. Let's go ahead and write this down. And this is not even a sermon about money, but this is in here. Josiah and all the people gave their money for the development of the temple. The Christian practice of giving financially is an important part of spiritual development. Our finances actually have to do with our spiritual lives more than you would guess. This is a fact. I'm going to talk about that more in just a little bit, but look what else happened in verses 9 to 12. Okay, we read 9, look at 10. Then they entrusted it, what they entrust, the money, to the men appointed to supervise the work on the Lord's temple. These men paid the workers who repaired and restored the temple. They also gave money to the carpenters and builders to purchase the dressed stone, the timber for joists and beams for the buildings the kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. The workers labored faithfully. Will you say that little phrase with me? The workers labored faithfully. This is what they did. Let's go ahead and write this down. Josiah and all the people there labored faithfully. What does that mean to labor faithfully? It means each person did what they were skilled at, okay? So you got some skills in some area. I have skills in some area. I am not good at directions, right? I got lost on a cruise ship. I sometimes need a GPS to get home in Salina. It's bad, right? I have skills, I don't have skills. You have areas that you're great in and areas you're not so great in. So they found what they were great at, and they used it to build the temple. Maybe for some of them it was leading. Maybe for some of them it was carpentry, whatever it was. And we as Christians, this is really similar. We are called to serve the church according to our own ability. There's a whole bunch of scriptures. I'm not going to go through them all today, but there's a whole bunch of scriptures that take this principle that these guys are laboring faithfully and they apply it to us. We should labor faithfully. You have been given gifts by the Lord God to use to help people around you in the church develop spiritually. Do you know that? People want to develop spiritually, but you have abilities and gifts that they need for them to develop. It started with finances, right? Josiah said, hey, we're going to build this temple. We're going to work for the Lord. Starts with money. I'm not going to tell anybody here how much money you should give to God. I'm just not going to do that. That's stupid. Theologians will often say you should give 10% of your income to the Lord. I think it's kind of a dumb thing to tell people because we get the number 10%, it's called a tithe, from the Old Testament part of the Bible. But you know that in the Old Testament, they weren't told to give 10%. They were told to give 10% 3 different times. They were told to give 30%, okay? So when people say, well, do you believe in tithing? I say, wow, do you? Well, of course, you give 30% of your income to God. That's really cool. They're like, what? Like, if you want to follow the law and go back there and do 30%, then that's great. I'm not going to tell you how much to give. I think the pattern you find in the newer part of the Bible, the New Testament after Jesus, is to be generous. I think 10% of our income is a great goal to shoot for. I think if we're giving God our leftovers, spiritually, we're going to get leftovers. The Bible actually says we reap what we sow. Do you know that? You reap what you sow. So if you're giving God leftovers, don't expect to get much other than leftovers. You are either developing or you are deteriorating. How well are you building? And this isn't just so that the church can exist, but Jesus said, wherever your money is, that's where your heart is. That's where your mind is. So if you want to love God more, it starts with your wallet. I heard this phrase one time. This guy said, if you want to know what someone cares about, look at their bank account and look at their calendar, and you'll know everything you need to know about them. I think that's probably true, right? I mean, I think it's probably true. I don't want to end up in front of God someday and be like, oh yeah, God, I said I loved you with all my heart, but I spent more money on hot dogs than I gave to you. I spent more money on cigarettes than I spent more money on my, whatever it is, you name it, my car. I don't know. I mean, wow. And I don't want to belabor the point. This isn't a sermon about money, but hey, we're in the middle of a building project. We're about to pour some concrete. This is really good. Have you ever thought about the fact that you're here, and the reason you're here is because someone loved you enough to pay for money for that light right there, for that light. Someone loved you enough to pay for money for that drum set. Someone actually thought about you, maybe not you specifically, but they knew there's gonna be someone who comes here someday who's going to need a visual illustration instead of Jeff's stupid old rickety whiteboard that he used to write on. And they loved you enough to get this. They loved you enough to buy a front door. They loved you enough to put concrete in this building. You understand what I'm saying here? Like this is something we do because we love people, because we want our hearts to go towards God, and that's why we do it. We're building instead of allowing things to deteriorate. Now, the sermon it's not about money. It's also not about service, but we see it. Josiah gave money. Josiah started serving. The people serve. I've seen it 100 times, and studies show it. Those who develop the practice of serving, volunteering, serving in a church are far, far more likely to stay involved and continue developing their spiritual life compared to those who don't. It's so easy to come and leave. It's hard to leave when you've got roots going down deep. So developing the habit of serving and volunteering and getting involved helps you have staying power spiritually. There's someone who volunteered to clean that coffee bar. There's someone who volunteered to take that red card that you sign up on every week and put it in the back of that chair. You know, because the people at first service, they all agreed. They took all those red cards. Somebody had to come back in and fill them up. And you're going to take them again. Someone's got to come fill them up before third service. You know, someone stands at that front door and welcomes you when you come in. When you were here your very first time, someone probably said, hey, have you been here before? No, let me give you a coupon to the coffee bar. Let me show you where you can go sit. And they told you about the church so it wasn't so awkward. Someone volunteered to do that. It's serving. It changes the heart. Someone volunteers in the kids area, not so that you get free babysitting, but so that those kids know what it's like to learn to love the Lord. Man, if you love coffee, go serve in the coffee bar. If you are a high-functioning, energetic, passionate, good person that's very capable, go serve in the kids area. We don't want no lazy, weirdo bums in there, okay? Someone was like, I'm a lazy weirdo bum. Okay, you can, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I don't know where that was gonna go. We got people who serve in our new building project, people who move dirt around. We got people who are gonna be hammering nails in, people who got gifts that I don't got gifts, man. They're all over. Serving is important because it develops us spiritually and it develops the church so that other people can develop spiritually. It's not merely about money or serving though. Your life, where you're at, is a result of thousands of little decisions you've made over the years. You know, let's say it like this. You can write it down. Josiah is building his life around the habits and around the disciplines that keep God a priority. I must develop habits like this too, right? Josiah didn't just wake up one morning and decide to reject all the evil his whole country had done and do all the good he could do just like that. It was the result of thousands of little decisions over the whole of his life. What would you say to someone that was like, I got a car and it ran out of gas, but I didn't want to go to the gas station and now it won't run. It's not fair. What is wrong with you? What would you say to someone like, I joined Weight Watchers and they have these weekly meetings and I went once a month. It doesn't work. Well, isn't it weekly? I went once a month. It doesn't work. What would you say to somebody who said, I got a job. My boss gave me 10 things to do. And I did 4 of them. He fired me for doing them 4 things. What would you say to that person? To all these people, I think you would say, bro, you were not all in. And the reason it failed is because you were not all in. You wanted the easy road. You wanted the easy out. You weren't willing to make the commitment. And this is what you need to hear spiritually. Josiah was all in. And you need to be all in. If you develop yourself halfway spiritually, it is not enough. It is not enough. So, someone just texted in. Next one, that was from last week. Just ignore the kids' murder if you weren't here last week. That was a great one to come up. I don't know why it's not working. Okay, they texted in and said, I loved you enough to grout the tile in the bathroom here 10 years ago, right? Yeah, man, right? All in. I will grout tile in a bathroom. Listen, even if you never do anything wrong again, you still have to develop your relationship with God, don't you? What are you going to do? Here's some practical application. Here are some ways that we can develop. First of all, attend church weekly. I mean, you're here. I'm preaching to the choir. I'm not going to belabor this point. You know, if you're seeing this sermon online weeks later, be in church every week. Habits to develop. Giving financially. This is another habit to develop. It's a difficult habit to develop. I mean, if you're used to putting yourself first and giving God leftover, it's a very difficult thing to change, right? And you agree with me, those of you who had to change it, right? It's hard to change. And what do I recommend? I'm a nerd, so I like spreadsheets. I got any fellow nerds in here? Anybody else like spreadsheets? All right, there's a few of us nerds around here. Right? Look, I think it's best if you make a budget. If you don't make a budget and you don't tell your money where to go, your money's always gonna be pushing you around, telling you what you gotta do. You gotta decide what comes first with your money and what comes second and what comes third. I think you need to write it out, and at the very top, you need to write God. And you need to decide how much God's gonna get first thing, whether it's 10% of everything you have or 5% or whatever. You gotta do it first. If you don't do it first, he's gonna get leftovers, all right? Next thing to develop, serving. And membership. You have a membership class tonight for those people who were in growth group at least 2 rounds and who've served for at least 6 months. But serving is a big deal. You know, if you go to a growth group, in 2 weeks, you're gonna get a survey that asks you what you're good at and what you might like to do in church. It'll help you get some ideas about where you could serve in our church in case you don't know where to go. But the question is, are you developing or are you deteriorating? Because it's one or the other. You gotta be doing this stuff. What about Bible study and prayer? Man, if you've never really read the Bible, I really recommend that you start reading in the book of Matthew. Do not start reading in the book of Genesis at the very beginning of the Bible and try to read straight through. That's not how the Bible is designed to work. The Bible is actually not one book, it's 66 different books. And just like Star Wars started on episode 4, it's best if you start in Matthew, okay? Don't start at the beginning, you're gonna get stuck on Jar Jar Binks and hate your life, okay? So you like Jar Jar Binks? Well, you're also a Seattle Seahawks fan, so. What? Okay, so we're gonna, I love you though. Okay, so you start in Genesis and you try to get all the way through. It's just gonna be really difficult. Start in Matthew and just start reading, a chapter a day or something like that. And what Matthew is, it's a biography of Jesus. Just do it every day. What about prayer? How do you develop a habit of prayer? You gotta carve out the time. Kind of like the budget where you have to make God your first priority. You have to make prayer a priority or you're just not gonna do it. You gotta say, I'm gonna do it on this day, I'm gonna do it at this time for this long, or it's just gonna fall apart and you won't get up to do it because you'll be tired or you're gonna end up doing something else. Something's always gonna get in the way. You have to make it a priority. Another habit, growth groups. One of the reasons this is an easy habit to develop is because your growth group already has a dedicated time and a dedicated place and people who will say, where were you when you don't show up? It's accountability, it's built in. And so many of us have come to church, we've known we gotta change something, but then we don't. Go to this place, develop yourself spiritually around people who are going to say, hey, you said you're gonna do this. Did you do that or not? Your life is a result of thousands of decisions, good or bad. Every little decision affects your destination. That temple was built beautifully and then it crashed. Maybe this is you. And if you don't, or maybe you've been down this path, but if you don't develop yourself, pretty soon you're gonna miss church. Pretty soon you're gonna cave to that temptation. And then one thing will lead to another until your spiritual life is trash and you might not even recognize it. What you need to be is around people and around places who are gonna take you as you are right now. And whoever you are, we love you right now. Right, church? We love every single person in here, no matter where they're at, even Seattle Seahawks fans. Every single person in this room. What you need to do is get in these relationships. They're gonna say, hey, what can you do better? And you're gonna make a change. And then you're gonna make another change. And then you're gonna develop more habits. And over time, your relationship with God is gonna get much better than you ever imagined. But you can't stop halfway. You gotta be all in. God, I'm gonna give you everything. I'm gonna develop the habits. I'm gonna focus on you. I'm gonna tear the sin out of my life and I'm gonna build. Are you developing or deteriorating? It's one or the other. And distraction is deadly. But focus, it'll bring freedom. Let's pray. Lord God, I pray for the people in this room who know that they've had distractions. I pray that you'll be able to help them purge and get rid of them, but I also pray that you help them be able to develop the habits in their life that would bring them closer to you. We know that there's really no such thing as neutral. We're either moving closer to you or further away. So I pray in Jesus' name that you'll help us to develop. And if there's anyone in here who doesn't even recognize the deterioration that they've had, I pray that you open their eyes so that they can see it. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great week. Go develop.